Welcome back to Verse by Kurt. My name is Kurt Knutson, and today we are going to look at the book of John. Now, there are a few different Johns in the Bible. There's the Gospel John, there's 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. Those numbered Johns are all what we call epistles or just simply a letter. And then he also wrote the book of Revelation. So he wrote 5 books with 3 genres, which is interesting. And Revelation, just a side note, it's not Revelations. Everybody corrects people with that. It's Revelation. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ to John the Apostle. But today we're in the Gospel of John. And remember, this is just the book sheet. We will have a day dedicated to this, but that'll be at the end of everything. But real quick, we just want to identify what the genre is. And today it's a gospel. A gospel is just a narrative about Jesus. There might be some information about the author, by the way, today. But if we forget to put it in or whatever, don't worry. We're gonna eventually just come back to this sheet. But I did take some time to put the chapter markings here. There's 21 chapters in John, so I didn't do anything with the broad sections or the subsections because there are some subsections in this book today, but we'll put that all in next time we do the whole book at the end of the thing. But the broad divisions, if there's 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 instances, the Gospel of John's kind of has a interesting kind of division, but we'll do the subsections later. Like I said, there's some internal evidence possibly. And the audience, we want to know both the author and the audience. We're going to stick to the traditional people for now, which is, I won't spoil anything. I guess you have to know before we go on, but author is traditionally John. It's to people who don't know the Bible. The purpose is clearly stated. Some themes arise that are very consistent in John, but like I said, we're going to do that another time. So we are going to actually break it down, and we're going to spend 15 minutes. So it's going to be fast. I apologize, but I want to be respectful of your time. And we're going to take a couple of pauses. So you can pause the video. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to make some cuts here just so we can save time. And what I want to do first is I want to go through the observation phase with you all. That's the who, what, when, where, why, or words, I should say. But first we want to identify it's the book of John, and we are in the 1st chapter. Okay, today is numero uno. All right, so we are going to go through both the interpret and the application. We're going to try and do 5 minutes apiece. If I might go over on the observation phase. It usually takes the longest. For the structure, we are going to plot out some narrative. There's some logic in the first section. Now, I'll talk about it in a minute here. But I'm just going to do the narratives today. We'll talk about the logic maybe another time or go toward the end of the book when we summarize. But I'll show you how to do that. It's actually pretty interesting to do. So, but what I'll do is I'll end up talking about the different observation phases, and I'll tell you to pause when it's relevant. Before you get started, you should read the passage. Spend some time doing that every single time so we can get started. Just take some time, read. Listen to an audiobook of the Bible. There's a lot of really good ones, and we will get started. You can pause now, and then I will meet you on the other end of me writing, and then we'll talk about the observation phase. Okay, first of all, the who. Oh, we got a few people, but I distilled it down. We have God. So we have in that Jesus, who is the Word, the Light, the Life, the Son of God, the Father, the Spirit. John the Baptist. We have the many, which there are two of. There's the received children of God, and by implication, those who are born of blood, flesh, and of man. And then there's a bunch of Israel. So there's Moses, Elijah, Jews, priests, Levites. There's somebody called the prophet, which is an interesting theological development, and it's written by the prophets. There's somebody who's going to come. Actually, there's in Genesis. We'll talk about that. We'll get there. I forgot to mention the disciples, but in one of the passages, there's Andrew, Simon, Philip, Nathaniel, and a question mark of a person. So for the what, I wrote born, becoming flesh, a quote of dwelt among us, which is interesting. That's going to be very central to this section. And then baptizing with water and spirit. I have the beginning for when. You could, I guess, have it as a place, but really it's a time, and it's hearkening back to presumably Genesis, but it depends on what that beginning is. There's another phrase here, existed before me. John the Baptist says that about Jesus, and what's interesting is, if you know the story, who was born first? It was actually John the Baptist. So that's kind of a very theologically loaded statement, existed before me. He's saying something about Jesus. Again, there's a theme here of him existing beforehand. And then there's a phrase here, Jews sent priests and Levites. That's when one of the stories kicks off. The Jews, they're a group in, I referenced them in the section on Israel. That's a new group kind of in John. He writes later than everybody else. And it is a negative thing, but it's not to say, John was Jewish. It's not to say Jews are not good, but it's just a category. And then 10th hour. So it's either 10 a.m. for the Romans or 4 p.m. in the Jews. I don't think we know. We can speculate that it's the morning. I mean, why not? But it's just, John notes that's the 10th hour. And then the world we have for a location. That's interesting. It's actually a person too, a group. You could call that the many, which includes, I probably should have had that, the whole world. There's a place, Bethany, beyond the Jordan. So not the typical Bethany, but another Bethany that is presumably to the east of Israel, on the other side of Jordan. Then we have where Jesus is staying. That's a location, and we don't know. And then there's Galilee. So a lot of interesting locations. I'll try and bring up a map so you guys know what I'm referencing. And here's some words that are of interest. I'm going to load these here together. Word, life, light. So John uses basic language. John is one of the people who you start learning Greek in seminary with his stuff because he has basic words, but he loads them with meaning. Believe. Underline every time believe is in your the Gospel of John. It's central. And then testified. There's a lot of testimony. Check out 1 John, the first chapter of 1 John later in the New Testament. There's a lot of interesting expansion there with testimony. And then Jesus says something interesting here. He says, behold, an Israelite in whom there is no guile or deceit. Wow. So Jesus, he's a Jew again. He's referring to his own people. This sounds like an old stereotype. It's an unfortunate stereotype now, but it's interesting that it existed back in the day, that Jews were cunning people, crafty, deceitful. I think they're poking fun. If I had my guess, I think they were poking fun at their occupiers here, the Romans. So, but he says that later to Nathaniel. So yeah, so some interesting phrases and words. So we're going to pause real quick, and then I'm going to show you the narrative. So each section, there's 3 sections. Each one has 6 narrative points. So if you see, you have the exposition, inciting incident, rising action, climax, and falling action, and resolution. So the first one I call the preamble. That's chapter 1, 1 through 18. You have the word, life, and light. You have John testifies of him. You have what the light did, the word became flesh, John testified, and why John testified. And you can see my verse, hopefully you can see my verse markings there. The next one is Jesus' baptism. So we'll talk about that in a second here. But notice the preamble is all about the fact that there is this person and this testimony about him. Again, that'll come up later in the interpretation phase. But I want you to notice, if you read the passage and you see the narrative arc, there's a lot of logic here that you could diagram too. But this is, this is packed with theology, this section. So, of course, we have Jesus' baptism, chapter 1, verses 19 through 34. The Jews ask. John answers. One is coming for the rising action. Jesus arrives. Jesus gets baptized. And the author, who is John, we're presuming, testifies. And then we end with the disciples, gathering the disciples. And this is John's account of it. John's disciples follow Jesus, which is interesting that this is John the Baptist, not John the disciple, who might have been one of these. That's the verse area to write. Simon and Philip follow. Philip tells Nathanael about Jesus. Nathanael's shocked. Nathanael believes. And then Jesus says, you'll see greater things. So there's a lot here. Here's the interpretation. I have 3. One preach story. So the first one here is, our belief in the word makes us children of God. And notice there's a testimony there. So that's basically what's happening, is there's a lot of testimony, but this word, this life, this light, it's all talking about who this word is and what he did for us. And it's about our belief in this testimony of this word. And the word is the testimony that makes us children of God. And he says that. Also, Jesus baptism prepares him to baptize with the Spirit. That's also a testimonial. I believe John the disciple testifies about that he saw it. So, baptize with the Spirit versus baptism with water. And that Spirit is everything. That's what gives us life. That's the Holy Spirit is what makes us a Christian. Jesus wants disciples to follow to see great things. And we're not just seeing it to see it. It's not a tour. It's to demonstrate to the disciples of what is possible. And so notice testimony is the huge thing here. And so if you're doing a sermon on all this, which would be a lot, or if we're doing application, testimony is the big deal. Okay? We have Jesus testifying, John testifying, and John testifying of all these things. And so here's some applications. So when we apply, I use the categories heart, soul, mind, strength, because it's part of the Shema, the love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. There are 4 categories of the ways we can love. So I just break it down that way. You don't have to. That's just how I do it, just so I can try to find variant ways to apply this. And then I can be in relationship with God in Christ. That is true. I can worship God for coming to save the world. And then here, check this. I can believe in the Son's coming in flesh. Coming in flesh is the big portion here. That really is like worship God for coming to save the world, the whole world, all people, and believing that, and him coming in flesh is like how it happens. And then we see and testify that God became flesh and dwelt among us. Again, the testimony, it's not just seeing to like observe, it's to notice so that we can proclaim that he came into flesh, which affects everything. It's not just God, he became man. So there you go.